So shame is related to not something that we do that is wrong, but on creating an idea, a representation of ourselves as intrinsically flawed. So I'm not sure. I was thinking about your question. If I would associate the experience of guilt itself, a macro social structures of the culture, I do know that Christian cultures are deeply shame-based because the moral system is shame-based. And in shame is possibly one of the most important tools of social control. It's extremely basic. There is no human who can't avoid reacting to shame because shame is a perception about belonging.
Welcome to the Open Notes podcast. Our study group includes me, Nora Mortimer, Kiana Gerhart,
Hello.
and Angela Thompson.
Hello.
Our guest today is Marilia, an independent scholar, social scientist, a powerlifting world champion, and a self-proclaimed knowledge broker. Grab a snack in your notebook. Let's get ready to study. Can you describe where you grew up and how that affects who you are as a person and a knowledge broker?
Okay, let me just clarify some things before. Knowledge broker, I don't treat that as a profession. I just say that this is what I do now with my sociological, biological, and other disciplinary skill tools. It's not really a profession. It is, but I wouldn't say there's a specialty. I think it's a thing that people with certain characteristics may do. I am the daughter of a professor emeritus of geology. He was one of the founding fathers of geology in Brazil. There were some older than him, but he was at the stage of institutionalization where geology came to maturity there. Before that, it was just natural history. So I grew up knowing I would be a college professor. It was an accident or a tragedy for the family that I didn't quite fit with the diplomatic or social requirements of the academic career. But I had the full career at the University of São Paulo, which is very, very high-ranking university. And there's a sense of pride, national pride, around the fact that it's a public university, it's autonomous. So this was important to me. I grew up under a military dictatorship. I was born in 1963, and the military coup in Brazil was in 1964. The military dictatorship lasted until 1985. So I grew up under fascism and being anti-fascist and actually related to the organized left, to the Communist Party, to Trotskyist organizations. I belong to all of that. So yeah, that shaped. I grew up from my parents' side to be a scientist. There was no question. I was not asked. And from a political perspective, scientific materialism. So yeah, that experience shaped my choices till it didn't work anymore in 2005. Then I had a bunch of different choices, but basically it's just a Lego construction. I was building other houses, other things with the same blocks. I was already a sociologist, a biologist, a biochemist. I was already all these things. So it was just a question of reorganizing the blocks.
Speaking of your background, you have extensive research background and a powerlifting background. How do these feed into each other?
The links are not immediately obvious because they are not one type. Powerlifting came into my life not as a direct consequence of a career choice. It was, I'd say, even an accident, because I was not well. I was ill and missing the diagnosis and not doing well at all. And that's when I dropped out of academia. I handed my last report on the intellectual property Amazonia project, and I had to try to survive, or not, but figure out what I wanted, what was possible to do in terms of health. And my first thought, I need to exercise, but real. I was underweight. I was not doing well. The thing about exercising is that I had a memory of being in harmony, of being balanced, of being in control, of being happy for lack of any other word, when I was 12 to 15. And I was a fencer. I was a competitive fencer. I won national championships. It was my first love. And when I was already, it was 2004, so it was 30 something. And I realized that 40, I needed to do something. The only thing I remember that ever worked was that. So that's when I went back to, and I didn't know what would work. And at a certain point, I lifted something and it clicked. It clicked physically, symbolically, maybe, because it's hard to explain. It's not exactly a scientific explanation or a social explanation, but there's a symbology on the lift. The lifts are basically creating an amalgam. You fuse with the weight. In terms of exercise science, there's a name for that. There is an expression, which is the athlete barbell complex. It's a concept, but it's also a way we map space in ourselves. We become this thing that has a purpose, which is go from position A to B and then returning to A. That's it. Simplicity. It is seductive and it's integrating. I've seen a lot of people in this state of fragmentation, in a deep state of mental distress, recovering through that. So I think that was it. It was not a conscious choice of any kind. I was just surviving. And like I said, we don't address intellectual habitants. So it immediately became an object of intellectual for me. Everything does. That's how I was raised to be. So I started studying all of that from all points of view. I've published articles on sport sociology, on sport psychology, in co-authorship with another sports psychologist. I've co-authored papers on biomechanics and on sports physiology. So you can look at many aspects of the same thing. I'm not good at creating knowledge in all these things, but I certainly am at integrating them.
Then, from your perspective, as an athlete and an educator, is the process of finding motivation similar?
Yeah, no, it's not. The athlete would be more comparable to the student or the researcher. It has a gigantic component of inner search. So the dose of intrinsic motivation, of autotelic drive, has to be huge to not be conflicted. It has to be honest pleasure in the execution of the thing itself. In that respect, the athlete and the learner, and from student to researcher, we're all learners, follow a same motivation architecture with a heavy intrinsic participation. Now, the coach and the educator are the transcendent aspect of our practice. I'd say it's a kind of motivation that transcends the notion of extrinsic and intrinsic. It is transcendent. It's why you are in the world.
How have you seen the culture in gyms and powerlifting change over time? And do you have any idea of where it's going to go?
I love this question because that's the question I intend to answer moving forward, because I've been a long time away from them. I am returning. I'm making this movement, and it's scary because a lot of people look at me as a returning thing. Returning to what? What am I returning to? I'm not returning to the self I used to be. I'm now an old lady. I really fell into old age in this turn. And I'm not returning to the same community. They grew too. The thing is, the majority of them are young. And I don't think they see that, because when I was 50, I didn't see myself in the track of aging as I am now. It's funny and it's scary returning. The last thing I wrote about the culture, about the community, was very pessimistic. Was my book on suicide and lifting. I don't think I would write that book today. I don't recant it, but I would write that way. All I saw that moment was my athlete who died of suicide. I wrote the book for him. And so I saw the dark aspect of the strength culture. Strength sports have a peculiarity. They're rarely collegiate activities, less weightlifting, and even then rare. So a lot of that is practiced or was practiced in what we call strength gyms. And in many of them, a significant segment of them had cultural structure and very fringe, like manosphere thing, and very dark. And a lot of boys got dragged into, not a lot, but enough to make a difference in suicide statistics. And I don't like that because that's what we see. What we don't see is what worries me. But I think a lot of that has improved significantly. And I think we owe that to something that I don't like to praise, but I have to, which is CrossFit. CrossFit has shown a light of fun into these fringe things like strongman, powerlifting, weightlifting, and it became fun. It became a playground for the grown-ups. And I think it took these dark corners of the strength sports out of the shadows. If not, I hope it does.
So you have researched a lot on wrist wraps and their importance in support and mobility to prevent injuries. What inspired that research? Was it a particular person, like your book about suicide, or was it just an overall thing that you were seeing in gyms?
That's interesting. Did I tell you that I look at this study object through many different sides? Those articles were mostly about the use of wrist wraps, but it's all about the wrist wrap. If you don't know what a wrist wrap is, you read that and you understand how it was conceived, people imagined wrist wraps, the early patents, the technological track, up to how lifters use the wrist wraps. I did a survey on that, and so there's originality. Why I did that? Because I was my first sponsor as an athlete was a wrist wrap manufacturer, a super creative guy, small business. His website was completely crazy, and he liked me. And he, at the time, I was involved in a project, a social project that a local coach at a local slum in São Paulo called Paraisópolis, Paradise City, more ironically. And we were working with kids at risk, teenagers and stuff. And Alan, the owner of APT Wrist Wraps, he was very kind and sent a lot of stuff to us for the kids. But he also wanted to work with me. I'll sponsor you, write some stuff for my website. That's how it began in 2007, I think, 6 or 7. I wrote something for Alan for him to put in his website. And from then on, I discovered that I really like equipment. I think it's so much fun to look at the different types, and maybe it's one of those neurodivergent things that it's a special interest. I love them, and I started collecting them. Manufacturers started sending them to me, and I started testing. Yeah, I became a little bit of an authority in wrist wraps, and then on knee wraps, and then on knee sleeves, not shoes. Never became an expert on shoes, but also on more crazier types of equipment that only powerlifters use, like bench shirts and squat suits. But more into these wrist wraps and stuff. Companies started sending me stuff. That's how it starts. It starts with I also like wrist wraps a lot because I have a little bit of hypermobility. My wrists turn, and I do need wrist wraps because for me they're so important. I didn't know that it was rare. It's this level of hypermobility is rare on a bencher because that's a lot of weight exactly on this joint. But I do, so it's a combination of things.
There another piece of equipment that you would like to research?
I think all of them. They all the classic ones because of their simplicity. I wrote on Olympic bars. That was complicated because it involved specialties that are really far from me. It's engineering, metal engineering, and stuff like that. And but I loved learning about it, and I may not know metal engineering, but I know about the athlete that goes under the bar and creates this complex. I know about the human that interacts with the bar. The thing about equipment, but I remember friends asking me, has helped me improve. I stalled. I can't lift more than 200. I want to reach this new PR or something even worse. Like it's a mental barrier. And I remember once late in a gym, me and these guys, all of them coaches and athletes, and I said, sit down here. Just don't go lift. Look at the bar, a deadlift bar on the floor. Look at her. Talk to her. Only when she says she wants to move, you go there and lift it. And then the three of us were looking at the bar. And they exploded laughing and said, I can't do that. This is stupid. But it works with a lot of people. It works with me. So I have a way of dealing with my own symbols, my own relationship with these objects that are so invested in value and emotion and important representations for me, and that I think I do creative work with them.
So you discussed that you wrote for your sponsor. And while researching about you, I saw that you had a Substack blog which discussed a variety of different topics. And one that particularly stood out to me was called Shame on Me, where you discuss the correlations between shame, guilt, and aging. And my question is, do you think shame is taught because of generational trauma, cultural, or even historical events as to why we act or react in such a way?
Let me close in the context. This Substack is called Reinvention Adventures. I had to choose it like right away because I couldn't get into another account. I created this. It was very unpretentious at the time. I just wanted to document my return to lifting. Not so long ago. I need to really go back to lifting in 93. And I think it was in 94 that I created this Substack to document everything that was around it, including my new approaches to diet and how I was going to deal with my chronic conditions and change if I can't fix the thing with medication, this, how can I look at this thing? So it was about, in the end, it was about falling, crashing into old age without parachute, without an expectation, because from where I came from the worlds I came from, not no fault of theirs, but that I chose to resonate with. There was nothing there. You read The Shame on Me. If you go ahead a couple of essays, you're going to find a series about the futures. It's directly connected. I discovered that when I started to research how we represent the future, neurologically, physiologically, socially, and how we integrate that, I didn't represent the future. I didn't have a future representation of my. Of course, I made the worst possible decisions, not only in my professional life, personal life. So shame is related to not something that we do that is wrong, but on creating an idea, a representation of ourselves as intrinsically flawed. So I'm not sure. I was thinking about your question. If I would associate the experience of guilt itself, a macro social structures of culture, I do know that Christian cultures are deeply shame-based because the moral system is shame-based. And in shame is possibly one of the most important tools of social control. It's extremely basic. There is no human who can avoid reacting to shame because shame is a perception about belonging. The neurology of shame is important because it's probably there for a very long time. It has to do with who am I? How do I conceive myself as a member, as a legitimate, as an acceptable member of this group, whatever? If I can't, if I am shamed, who am I? I think we're going to see shame wherever there is a heightened state of social violence, of disseminated social violence, because it's such an important mechanism of social control. That's what I think. I am a person with, I know I am shame shaped and I struggle with that. And my family was atheist. My parents were atheists and they had their issues with the Catholic Church, but my mother ruled through shame. So I think there is something. Our Latino cultures deal with shame in a different way, I think, than the Anglo-Saxon cultures, which is completely different from healthier cultures. My husband has a family with indigenous origins, and he tells me things that go beyond my experience in the Brazilian social sciences. And I worked with Amazonia, in Amazonia, with Amazonian topics. I had interactions, but the indigenous tribes there, they were used to, they had a language to speak to us from the major society. It doesn't matter how friendly and or allied we were. They were already school. We're gonna talk to you like that. My husband can tell me more basic things like that. Like, how do you deal with shame? How do you deal with being the other? Like having a different behavior as a child. Like, what if a child is blind or deaf or neurodivergent? I asked him and asked some other people from either from with double backgrounds from traditional cultures, and they never needed to name this type of otherhood. The kid that behaves a little different. I asked him and he said, it's the kid who behaves a little different. Why do you need a name? And so I think, yeah, the cultures that need a name for the kid who behaves a little different will shame the kid who behaves a little different. Strongman is the closest thing I've seen in the sports to a popular fair. You know how it's done in Brazil? It's on a Sunday, the street is closed, people drink, smoke weed, turn a few tires, have fun. The high level professionalized sport is far away. Before anything, it's fun stuff to do on the streets. It has always been a circus activity, a fun thing. Let's see who throws this thing here the farthest. That's it. And I thought it was really disrespectful to commodify the fun that people were having on the streets by associating it with commercial porn drenched product, which was also pretty bad for the female strength athletes. And that was the fight, but it led nowhere. And I think the media is much more tamed now. We're less treated like circus animals.